I'm Jeremy Shear, and my guest is Fraser Wilson, Director of Mattering and Impact at AnywhereWorks. Fraser, it's great to have you on the show.
Awesome. It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You're quite welcome. Now, your title, as I just said, is Director of Mattering and Impact. That's kind of an interesting job title. Explain a bit what that means. Why mattering?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, I'm the global marketing director. So we feel marketing can sometimes have negative connotations because sometimes it's more consumerism, more consumption, trying to sell more and more. So we like this idea of how do we matter more? How do we matter to the environment, the world, our customers, our people?
Okay, very cool. Very interesting. So let's start by having you tell us about a memorable marketing moment from your career, and then say a few words about AnywhereWorks. But let's start with something that's really stuck with you marketing-wise over the years.
Awesome. I would say the campaign that we ran earlier this year, Pledge People Not Bots, that's probably been my most memorable for a few reasons. Number one is that we brought in someone quite famous to help us kind of launch the campaign. So we're really lucky to have Sally Phillips, who's a writer and comedian, be part of the campaign. So that was fantastic. And we also shot a kind of a really high quality production video, and it's been a really successful campaign. So I think for many reasons, because the campaign's been successful, it's memorable, but also the message is really memorable. So in a world where kind of AI is becoming more common in every aspect of our lives, and when you're trying to contact many businesses we all do day to day, you're experiencing bots or your decision flow trees before you can speak to a real human. We kind of question what are the long-term impacts of that? And it's a little bit of a sad world, perhaps, in which we cannot engage human to human when it matters most. So the video that we shot around the campaign pokes fun of this fact, and that, someone might look like a human. They might, you might have human characteristics and traits, but do they really act human? And do they really understand pain points? And are they really there for you? So I think overall it's been a really exciting campaign, and it's one that we've kind of launched throughout all of the AnywhereWorks brands. And the video on YouTube's had over 1 million views now. So we're super proud of that.
Wow, yeah, that's really awesome. And I've watched the video. It really is quite funny. It's really great. We'll put a link to it in the show notes so people can check it out.
Awesome. Glad you liked it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. And so I know we're going to talk more about this, about the campaign and about just sort of the idea at the center of it, of human connection. But first, tell us a little bit about AnywhereWorks, what you guys are all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a global B2B software and services company. We were founded in the US, and we now have brands in Canada and the UK as well. And essentially what we are aiming to do throughout a range of different products and services is we're aiming to help small businesses grow. So we want to help businesses work from anywhere. So yeah, we have a house of brand strategy with many different kind of components under that. And we target different industries and different niches with kind of really amazing support. One of the core parts of our business is when it's kind of after hours or weekends or holidays, potentially if you're a small business, you can't answer phone calls or live chats or Facebook messages or appointments, booking for your customer. So that's where we come in. So we provide services behind the scenes, meaning that you never miss an opportunity.
Okay, very good. And I think this ties in directly to the People Not Bots campaign, right? Which is all about, as you explained, sort of this concern with what are the implications of our interactions with businesses being more and more with AI, rather than actually talking to people, right? And I think, everyone's experienced that. And in a way, it's nothing too recent, right? I mean, for decades now, when you call a company, you're more likely to get an automated phone voice rather than someone, and you have to go through this whole phone tree until you can finally maybe speak to a human being. I think that experience is sort of universally pretty much loathed. I don't think anyone likes it. We sort of tolerate it.
Yeah.
What's like, to your mind, what's the concern here at its core? Because we are in a world where this technology is just getting more and more sophisticated. People are spending more and more time with, bots rather than people. Why, in fact, is that a concern?
Yeah, no, great question. I think ultimately, probably kind of thinking about how we got to this stage. I think in many businesses where profit is your number one metric, you really focus on how you get as many customers to self-serve as often as possible. So you'll find that on many websites, when you're trying to find the phone number or you're trying to find the email address, you're pushing this series of chatbots or to, just basically a decision tree behind the scenes to try and push you to self-serve your issue or your question online. Ultimately, that's quite sad because the whole purpose of business is to connect, and it's at its core, kind of with customers in a business environment. Why would you want your customer not to have that connection opportunity with you? It feels a little bit anti maybe loyal to business. It's a little bit of a kind of strange one when you think about it from a real perspective. But I think the way that it's kind of come through to our norm and why it's such an issue is AI is only getting more intelligent. And, I kind of, there's lots of learning and there's articles in this every single day around, AI getting to the next step of understanding human behavior, or AI, with a face and a name, or, AI obviously in many homes and businesses, whether that's just your smart home device or otherwise. It becomes a question then of, are we trying to pretend that AI can sound like and can perform the same task as humans? And, AI, I think, can serve a purpose with, data mining, data processing behind the scenes. But when it comes to human connection, it's quite a sad world in which a human can't speak to another human to solve an issue or have a discussion or have their questions answered. And particularly when it comes to small businesses, it can be very kind of like cold and unfriendly. And even at its very core, a bot, as it were, could be your voicemail. So your voicemail could be considered a bot. Someone's looking to get a hold of you, and instead they're faced with an automated system to leave a message. And that's why we feel so passionately about this idea of pledge people, not bots, because if someone is trying to speak to a human, they should be able to speak to a human. And I think, this idea of it all coming down to cost control, or all coming down to squeezing kind of, cost to serve for your customers, it's quite a sad reality. And we need to be careful that we don't exclude humans from the conversation in years to come. Because what about jobs? What about employment? What about kind of like human to human connection? So I think this is the right time to have this conversation. And it's not to say we're archaic and we don't believe in any kind of AI. It's not to say that. It's just to say, here and now, let's have a real conversation and think about what we want in the future. Because a world in which people work from home or work from anywhere, they only interact with bots or AI, they maybe are missing out in human to human connection. What does that paint for the world? So I think I'm going a bit big picture here, but that's kind of what it comes back to for us as a business. And we need to think about that and have this discussion.
Mm-hmm. So what about the business case? Because I think you already said this, the business case for automation, right, for AI, is that it's cheaper. Instead of having to employ a bunch of people like at a call center to always be available, you have a bot that can handle at least some questions, queries, customer interactions with maybe in the back if you really needed a person. And that's just more efficient, economical. The AI is getting better and better at handling those queries in a more and more human-like way, right? So that's the business case for bots. What's the business case, on the other hand, for maybe not so many bots, more human interaction up front? Like, if you're a for-profit business, you're like, well, we are trying to maximize profits. That is the point of a for-profit business. What's the business case? Let me hear you make that business case for less bots, more people.
Great question. And I think I'll focus on small businesses first, if that's okay, because I think that's probably the foundation that, any business arguably starts small anyway, but, the backbone of our society is small to medium-sized businesses.
Yeah.
And I think in many of these cases, you tend to have maybe it's a family-owned, maybe it's, someone that's kind of like developed the business and brought in friends to get started, and then it's gained some scale, or, potentially it's someone that's worked for a big business starting out on their own. In many of these different examples, it's a person or a few people that are the go-to known for that business. And if I use the example of like plumbers, or use the example of builders, or the example of lawyers, or any industry, you can think of probably the person maybe rather than the business. And I think this idea of like, we connect with humans before we connect with a brand is something that potentially we are kind of on the cusp of missing out on. And I think the business case of prioritizing human to human connection over AI is your customers, if they're looking to speak to you, they want to speak to you. And if you look at the kind of loyalty cycle for a customer, if you don't give them the option to speak with you and connect with you, you're potentially, frustrating them, annoying them. But at worst, you're potentially losing a customer that could be loyal for the sake of trying to save a few dollars in your kind of cost to serve kind of model. So what we would say is there's many solutions out there. It doesn't mean you need to staff 24/7. It doesn't mean you need to go and get a huge call center service. Some of the services we offer are, low monthly costs. You then just basically, if you answer your calls or your chats or schedule appointments during the day, that's fine. But when you clock off or when you're, spending time with your family or taking a well-deserved break or a holiday, we switch on. And for, a small monetary amount per month, that's peace of mind that your customers never have to deal with a bot or an answering machine or AI. They're always going to reach a real person without you having to pay all that staffing cost up front. So I think overall it's a cost benefit analysis based on, yes, on the kind of front end, you may save money up front by using an AI or a bot or some kind of chat tool like that. But long term, are you losing money out of your customer lifetime value? Are you losing loyalty? Are you losing brand reputation? And I think it's thinking more holistically around your business and the brand you want to be. And even in the for-profit space, I think there's been a bit of a shift recently where there's more businesses, even if they're for-profit, they're also for purpose. So, I think if we think about purpose and we think about the business we want to leave behind, or the legacy of a brand, environmental factors have become huge recently. And, this idea of how can businesses and people do more to be green and to be mindful of the environment. But also the other side of that is the connection side. So how can we be human and how can we, have jobs and how can we grow within our communities and how can we be there for people? So I think it's an interesting point, and I think it depends on the business and what they prioritize, but definitely it's not as black and white as upfront, AI is cheaper, so that's the way to go. I think there's more that feeds into it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think I can think of plenty of examples of how, another way of putting, I think what you're saying is that human connection can help maximize profit.
Yep.
Right. Like you said, there's definitely a place for AI and it's obvious that done the right way, it can save you money, and at least in the short term, right, in certain ways. But when it's too much at the expense of human connection, then it's actually not so good for the bottom line.
I think so.
I think I see, like I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I really see a lot of discussion there, almost like a movement there for more human connection. And it's quite clear that, most companies have, if they're on LinkedIn, as many are, they have a company page, like a corporate page, but then also many individual members of the business might have a presence on LinkedIn. And it's those individual LinkedIn profiles that get all the interaction, right? People don't want to interact on a platform like LinkedIn with just like the corporate page. No one, that's not fun. It's not interesting, but individual people with a particular point of view and kind of a personal brand, so to speak. There are plenty of people on LinkedIn who representing their companies, but they're not talking about their companies. It's all about, hey, as an individual marketer, a salesperson, I have some insights and thoughts and I'm sharing them. And that's what seems to get the most engagement. And I think that's pretty telling, not just for LinkedIn, but for business generally, especially in the B2B world.
I would totally agree. I think people value connection, people value people, and ultimately as humans, we are pack animals. So I think this idea of kind of, someone in the know, and if you think about, bringing it back to small business, it tends to be someone recommended someone to you, or, you found an advert and then you've looked up reviews and someone's recommended someone by name. It's very personal and very connected. So I agree. And actually interesting that you brought up on LinkedIn, there was recently an NPR article where they'd stumbled across some brands that actually were using for lead gen artificial intelligence LinkedIn pages, where they were creating kind of fake profiles, and everything about it was fake, but made to look real. So even down to the profile photo was actually an AI generated photo. This is a little bit scary, and this is something we need to be aware of. So, we need to have this conversation now to think about what does the future look like, because if AI is kind of dressing as humans and kind of looking more and more human-like and interacting in a human way, how do we make sure that we're not losing the foundations of what makes us human?
hmm I mean, that's sort of a fascinating philosophical question, right? You think of the Turing test, like Alan Turing, the famous British computer scientist, right, and mathematician. And I mean, for listeners who don't know, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, the Turing test is when dealing with an artificial intelligence, can you tell that it's an artificial intelligence?
Hmm.
Or to what degree can it sort of convince you that it's human, right? And there have been a bunch of movies about this. One of them was Ex Machina. Did you see that
No, I've
movie?
not
It's
seen
pretty
that
cool.
one. No, no.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool movie just about this, essentially, about a sort
Okay.
of like a mad scientist type, like a tech guru genius guy who invents an AI, like a woman who
Mhm.
is all nearly human in every single way. And I won't give I don't want to spoil it, but it's, this is sort of been a common theme for movies ever since Terminator, maybe even before that. But in any case, yeah, it's I totally agree. I mean, I think the pandemic really enhanced this, or really showed, like, when you're cut off from other people, it can have very dire consequences socially, uh, morally, right, and in business too. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think businesses are really grappling with this now, where with more and more people working from home or working remotely. I mean, it's an interesting question. How do people seem to want that, but what are the
Totally.
consequences?
Totally. And I think this idea of, the most human business wins, this kind of quote
Mm,
is getting kind of pushed around. And I think if you think about the interaction you have with your bank or something that
yeah.
all of us have in common, you know, there's a time and place where maybe you don't want it to be human interaction. We think about an ATM at its core is removing the interaction of going to a bank teller to remove money, right?
Yeah.
And you think that's sped up the process, it's made it easy over time. However, if you had a question about, a savings account, or you wanted, a more in-depth consultation about your mortgage, or you wanted to talk about something else through your finance, it might feel quite uncomfortable if that then happens with an AI or something pretending to be a real person, because surely you're relying on the real person creating that connection and understanding your situation. And I think if we think about something like that we've all got in common, it's then, oh, how does that apply to all the other different touch points we have with businesses, and where should humans be
hmm
part of? So when we are talking to the business customers that we have, certainly this idea of kind of always prioritizing your customers. So whether that's lead generation or your existing customers, always prioritizing their experience over and above anything else means that if they're trying to contact you, they want to speak to you. They want to speak to a real person. So that's kind of where we come in.
Right. Yeah, I think the ATM's a good example, right? I think as a society generally, when it's purely transactional, we're fine and actually appreciate the convenience of the ATM machine, or just being able to buy stuff online, without having to interact with a person or do banking,
Yep.
right? Generally speaking, transferring money, it's good not to have to physically go into the bank
Mhm.
and do all that stuff, right? No doubt about it. But when you're trying to solve a problem, then it's a whole different story.
Yeah.
And you just don't, where the AI is not to the point yet, if it ever will be, where we're completely comfortable with, yeah, sure, I know this is an automated response and that's fine. No, I want the reassurance of a human being who's it's not just transactional, right? There's an emotional quality to it. You need
Totally.
to know that you're
Totally.
dealing with someone who gets your problem, not just the technical details of it, but why it's a problem,
Yeah.
and has like some empathy and is clearly trying to help you and has your best interest at heart, right? All that stuff
Mhm.
that machines simply cannot do, at least not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, and that's the part of it. Do we want them to, or actually do we
Yeah, I
value
don't
the
know.
human connection side? So I agree. You're totally right, and I think having the kind of real person empathy, connection, support to kind of when someone requires it. So it's not delayed. It's not, oh, speak to a chatbot first or speak to AI first or go through a decision flow first. It's when someone needs that support or that help, we'll help you and we'll have that connection, and we'll build it instantly.
Yeah. I mean, I would think too that another part of the business case is, especially if you're a small business in a competitive industry, that's a big part of how you differentiate, right? Just your customer support, how you interact with your customers one on one, because
Totally.
that's going to be unique to you. And you might not have as many resources as the other company or whatever. Um, but there's no limit on providing good customer service, or,
Totally.
connecting with somebody as a human being.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also it can be profitable is the other side of
Yeah.
it, So in terms of kind of lead generation, if you think about, maybe a service industry, so if you're thinking about HVAC or plumbing or one of these industries, potentially a phone call is your next lead, is your next customer.
Yeah.
So if you let that lead go to voicemail or you let the chat not be replied to, potentially you're missing out on future business. So I think this idea of, yes, it helps your existing customers and any phone calls to do with kind of like service and kind of experience queries, but also lead gen, which is kind of how a lot of businesses grow and flourish.
Absolutely. Wow, this is a super interesting conversation. We could keep going on and on, but we do need to wrap up. So a couple quick questions here to wrap up. So, what's your main focus in Q2?
Oh, good question. I would say our main focus as a business is um, I'd say it's kind of connecting with our target audiences. So as I mentioned, we are in many different niches and we want to do more. So we're looking at kind of integrations, we're looking at partnerships, we're looking at sponsorships, we're looking at different ways and events. We're looking at different ways to kind of target our customers where they're at. And we're also looking at kind of differentiation of channels. So we recognize there are multiple channels and routes to market for any customer. And I think this old idea of the B2B decision making model, because obviously our main customers is B2B in terms of the customers we serve. It used to be, you find, a route into market, whether that's search or direct mail, or maybe it's referral, whatever it happens to be. You have a conversation with a salesperson and you sign up. That really simple linear flow is kind of dead. And, as much as we like to hope, there's some customers and some do come through that route. Overall, it tends to be a bit messier, and there's many different points in that map where someone may read one of your reviews or a case study or see you on social media or have a referral, or they may bump into you at an event, or they may find you through an organic listing on a page. We need to be visible. So a big part of what our focus is within my team is to be as visible as possible in the right markets for our brands.
Okay, fantastic. What are the top 3 KPIs that your boss pays attention to?
Well, that's a good question. That is a really good question. I would say number one is purpose. Purpose. So we really kind of, and the reason at the start why my title is mattering, we really kind of put a lot of emphasis behind this idea of purpose and giving back. So we plant a tree on behalf of every employee and every customer every month. And we regularly donate back to different charity organizations and non-profits. So I think this idea of purpose and having meaning over and above profitability and over and above our core business is key. So that's a big metric that we try and hit. And it's a big thing that we look at. Where can we add this additional value? Another KPI in the B2B space is always going to be customer lifetime value. So it's always going to be, are your customers happy? How long are they staying with you? How strong are your customer interactions? And how great is the quality of engagements? All the kind of metrics that fall into customer lifetime value is key. And then as a last one, I'd say it's maybe not so much a KPI, but as a kind of general goal, it is really nailing the target niche. So if we are kind of devoting ourselves to a specific target segment, we really need to understand that segment. We need to know the pain points, the frustrations, the wins, the successes. We need to know their KPIs. So if you took, the services industry or the legal industry or the medical industry, any industry, we really need to understand and ingrain ourselves within that industry, have local knowledge that then can be applied to the services we offer. And ultimately, what we want to focus on is product, and we want to focus on having the best product and service experience in the market. And I think to do that, you need to know your customers really well.
Absolutely. And finally, what do you and your team hope to accomplish this year?
Oh, that's a great question. Many things. I think any of my team that are listening will probably say that the list is quite endless, which it probably is. And we always have more. I think in marketing, part of the fun of marketing, right, is you have more on your to-do list than time in the day.
Mhm.
And that's part of the fun and why many people choose this industry, because it's fun. There's always many things to do. But big things to achieve this year. We've got some kind of new launches we're looking at in terms of kind of global expansion into new markets, and also kind of new products targeting new segments. But ultimately what we want to do this year is have sustainable growth and to do something that matters. So whether that be the movement of Pledge People Not Bots, whether that be giving back to nonprofits, whether that be improving our customer experience or improving our product, ultimately my entire team, the aim is to do stuff that matters. And that's the whole idea of mattering rather than marketing. So yes, we want to grow. We want to be sustainable as a business for years and years and years to come. But we want to matter while we do it.
Love all that. Well, thanks so much for sharing all that and for a really great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. It's been great. Thank you so much, Jeremy.